Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know, and one day we'll all be gone. Taste the wind, don't let it blow on by. Sing songs of love, let the music get you high, and when it's said and done, you'll know the sun.
I grew up on a farm. I've been a gardener for many years. And I've learned that cutting off a bad weed is not good enough. I have to dig it out or pull it out, roots and all, if I want to get rid of it. And if we want to conquer COVID-19, the Delta variant, and all infectious diseases caused by bad germs, we need to get to the root of the problem: weak immune systems in most people. Millions worldwide have suffered hell from the coronavirus and its Delta variant. Many have died. My 86-year-old brother in Illinois was hospitalized 5 days because of the coronavirus. A man I knew for years here died with it. Many, if not most, of those who get very sick and die, sadly, are fat and or have other serious underlying conditions: kidney disease, liver disease, diabetes, alcoholism, cigarette addiction, cancer, heart trouble, and more. If you have any serious underlying condition, or if you've been eating crap and living unhealthy, like most people in this country, making big changes now is not going to protect you immediately from getting sick from the coronavirus or its variants. So most of you will get some protection if you get vaccinated. But some people, like Mary Adkins of Albuquerque, suffer apparently from the vaccination itself. And here is her short published letter from the August 19th, 2021 Albuquerque Journal. Mary Adkins writes, "There is no place to hide from the hourly overload of COVID graphs, pictures of shots going into arms, morbid coverage of deaths of non-believers of the shots, or suggestions that we are endangering our world if we do not get the shots. However," she says, "there has been no coverage of the after effects of those shots." She says, 8 months ago, I was vaccinated. I still suffer severe side effects similar to those reported by COVID survivors: weakness, fatigue, coughs. Do I hear cover-up? But if you're serious about living healthy in the future, and if you want to strengthen your immune system against all infectious diseases, from viruses and all other bad germs, make huge changes starting now and every day for the rest of your life. I have not been vaccinated, but here is how I keep my immune system strong. I drink no booze. I smoke no cigarettes. I take no prescription drugs. I use no street drugs. I eat no meat. I eat no dairy no cheese, no milk. I stopped cooked food in 1998. Cooking destroys most of the nutrients. Cooked food is dead. A cooked seed will never grow. If you take any seed on earth and you cook it and then you plant it, you can pray, you can water, you can hope, you can dance until hell freezes over, and it will never grow. It is dead. We need to eat only living, raw plant foods for the best health. I eat lots of fresh fruit, apples, bananas, peaches, grapes, mangoes, melons, one small avocado most days. I drink no fruit juice. We need the fiber of the whole fresh fruit. Fresh fruit are my healthy sweets. I eat nothing containing added sugar or artificial sweeteners. I eat no cake, no cookies, no ice cream, no pie, no candy. I drink no sodas, none of that shit. When I was a kid and in my 20s, I hogged out on those unhealthy sweets. I was addicted, severely addicted. And that's partly why I have only one tooth left in my mouth. I had surgery on the retinas of both eyes when I was 28 years old. Sugar addiction. It's hell on the eyes. But I changed, and I stopped the processed sugar shit. I eat no bread. I drink no coffee. I eat no meals in restaurants, no fast food, no McDonald's, hell no. Instead of restaurants, save money, save your health by having a picnic with friends in a park or in your own backyard, eating only healthy foods. Chew or blend the whole fresh fruit. My main food are 2, 3, or 4 quart jars every day of my blended smoothies. My smoothies are concentrated nutrition from plant foods, raw plant foods. The ingredients of my smoothies now are lentils, flaxseed, purified water, puncture vine, hawthorn berry powder, pecans that are shelled just before using, ginkgo leaves, fenugreek seeds, powder, arco powder, fresh alfalfa from my garden, green tea leaves, extra hot red chili pepper powder, rosemary leaves, some apple, and the most important herb of all, garlic. If you want to be healthy, eat garlic. It's a miracle herb. Eat it every day, several times a day, raw, never cooked. I eat bee pollen. In cold weather, I include dried colitis from my garden, mint and blue corn, and ginger root that I buy. I add apricot kernels when I have some. I eat blended carrots. I soak up the sunshine on most or all of my skin most days all year around, including most winter days. Sunshine is wonderfully healthy if we eat only healthy, raw plant foods, no junk foods. Never burn. If you're not used to it, start with a few minutes and gradually increase. I go to bed most nights between 9 and 10. I get up around 6. I like 8 to 9 hours of sleep. Nothing substitutes for enough sleep. The best nutrition in the world and the most exercise cannot substitute for enough sleep if you want to be healthy. And I enjoy short naps some days. Robbing yourself of sleep is very foolish. It's nothing to brag about. Hour for hour, the hours we sleep before midnight benefit us more than the hours after midnight. No late night parties for me. I love to dance, but I like to do it in the daytime or the early evening. I exercise vigorously in my room almost every day after I get up. Chin-ups, push-ups, crunches, many other exercises. Long walks on many days. I've drunk my piss for health every day since November 10th, 1999. Now usually 2 cups as I exercise in the early morning. I treasure heart-to-heart conversations with friends, new and old and young, male and female. I aim to forgive myself and to forgive others and to ask forgiveness. Grudges are poison. Grudges are no good. I go to many free or low-priced events, the rail yard market on Sundays, the flea market on Saturdays, the downtown growers market on some Saturdays, the gay pride parade. I love to hug men and women who enjoy hugging. And I love affectionate, passionate sex and romance with certain men if it happens. I enjoy my garden. So I do all of these things to stay healthy and to keep my immune system strong. I have not been vaccinated, and I do not plan to get vaccinated. Now, let me be clear. I cannot say for sure that I will not get sick from COVID. I cannot say for sure. But I think my chances of not getting sick from COVID are as good or better than someone who eats and lives unhealthy and gets vaccinated. Sadly, the drug companies selling the vaccines make billions of dollars off this awful pandemic. In August 1945, just months before I was born, Father George Zabelka, a Catholic chaplain with the United States Army Air Force, was stationed in the South Pacific. Father George Zabelka served as priest and pastor for the airmen who dropped the atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And after his discharge in 1946, Father George Zabelka gradually began to realize that what he had done and believed during that war was wrong, and that the only way he could be a Christian was to oppose all war. He was deeply influenced by the civil rights movement and the works of Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. Father George Zabelka changed from a military chaplain to a strong peace activist. And here is his powerful testimony. In 1945, Tinian Island was the largest airfield in the world, and 3 planes a minute could take off from it around the clock. And many of these planes went to Japan with the express purpose of killing not one child or one civilian, but of slaughtering hundreds and thousands and tens of thousands of children and civilians. And I said nothing, says Father George Zabelka. As a chaplain, I often had to enter the world of the boys who were losing their minds because of something they did in war. I remember one young man who was engaged in the bombing of the cities of Japan. He was in the hospital on Tinian Island on the verge of a complete mental collapse. Father George Zabelka says, this young man told me that he had been on a low-level bombing mission, flying right down one of the main streets of the city, when straight ahead of him appeared a little boy in the middle of the street, looking up at the plane in civilian wonder, childlike wonder. The man knew that in a few seconds this child would be burned to death by napalm, which had already been released. Yes, I knew civilians were being destroyed, and knew it perhaps in a way others did not know. And yet, Father George Zabelka says, I never preached a single sermon against killing civilians to the men who were doing it. I was brainwashed. It never entered my mind to publicly protest the consequences of these massive air raids. I was told it was necessary, told openly by the military, and told implicitly by my church's leadership. 75,000 people were burned to death in one evening of firebombing over Tokyo. Hundreds of thousands were destroyed in Dresden, Hamburg, and Coventry by aerial bombing. The fact that 45,000 human beings were killed by one bomb over Nagasaki was new only to the extent that it was one bomb that did it. Father George Zabelka, who had been this blind military chaplain, blind to the horror and the evil of war, and who became a strong peace activist, later says, for the first 3 centuries, the 3 centuries closest to Christ, the church was opposed to all war. With Constantine, the church accepted the pagan Roman ethic of a just war and slowly began to involve its membership in mass slaughter, first for the state and later for the faith. August 9th, 1945, Catholics dropped the atom bomb on top of the largest and first Catholic city in Japan. One would have thought that I, as a Catholic priest, would have spoken out against the atomic bombing of nuns. 3 orders of Catholic sisters were destroyed in Nagasaki that day. One would have thought that I would have suggested that as a minimal standard of Catholic morality, Catholics should not bomb Catholic children. I did not speak out, says the former military chaplain, Father George Zabelka. I, like the Catholic pilot of the Nagasaki plane, the U.S. plane that bombed Nagasaki, was heir to a Christianity that had for 1,700 years engaged in revenge, murder, torture, the pursuit of power, and prerogative violence, all in the name of our Lord. He says, until the various churches within Christianity repent and begin to proclaim by word and deed what Jesus proclaimed in relation to violence and enemies, there is no hope for anything other than ever escalating violence and destruction. He says, until membership in the church means that a Christian chooses not to engage in violence for any reason, and instead chooses to love, pray for, help, and forgive all enemies, until membership in the church means that Christians may not be members of any military, American, Polish, Russian, English, Irish, until membership in the church means that the Christian cannot pay taxes for others to kill others, and until the church says these things in a fashion which the simplest soul could understand, until that time, humanity can only look forward to more dark nights of slaughter on a scale unknown in human history. This powerful testimony from the former military chaplain who became a strong peace activist, Father George Zabelka. I am no longer religious, but I strongly compliment him for waking up and giving us this powerful testimony of a man who changed from silence on war to the absolute condemnation of all war. Will what I say make things better in a situation, not worse? Think before I speak, especially when I'm deeply hurt, when I'm angry. Think of what I would do if I had forgiven someone who deeply offended me, and then to do that because feelings to want to forgive can follow later. And often in life, when one door closes, another door opens. I hope now and after I die, those who knew me well, will live more healthy, more simply, more wisely, more fairly, just as many people have inspired me. I must learn to love, understand, and forgive myself before I can deeply love, understand, and forgive others. The earth is our only home. How can we love our neighbors while we trash the earth and destroy the plants and animals we all need to live? We can't live off high tech. We can't eat cars. We need the earth, the Mother Earth, to live. The same injustices that cause some people to become bloody terrorists can inspire others to become loving activists against injustices. We feel poor if we want more stuff and more money than we have. And advertisements and commercials aim to convince us to want and to buy much more than we need to enjoy life. Hold me accountable to walk my talk and to admit openly when I fail. Every culture, every group of people on earth has both kindness and cruelty, wisdom and bullshit. And I aim to learn from and live the kindness and the wisdom, and to reject the cruelty and bullshit in myself, in my own background, and in all cultures. And if you see me on the street and want to stop and talk a few minutes, I warmly invite you to do so. My friend Mary here in Albuquerque encouraged me back in 1990 to switch from a bank to a credit union. And I took her advice, and I'm glad I did. Now, nothing is perfect, but overall, locally owned credit unions are better than banks. And I switched to a local credit union 31 years ago. I've owned no car for 42 years. I've had no driver's license for 21 years. I've ridden in no car for 20 years. I ride city buses, but I mostly walk. Far better for my health, far better for our only home, Mother Earth. I would not keep any car, even if given to me free. I've had no refrigerator for 21 years, and I would not keep one if given to me free. I don't need it. I stopped cooking my food December 12th, 1998, over 22 years ago. Cooking destroys most of the nutrients. I stopped using machines to wash and dry my clothes over 20 years ago. I wash my clothes by hand at home, often in 5-gallon plastic pails, and then I hang them up to dry. And I use the wash water on my garden. I've not used a bathtub or a shower to bathe for over 20 years. I use a long washcloth and a container for water. I use that water also on my garden. I've used no air conditioner, no swamp cooler in my home for over 30 years. When it's hot, I live naked or mostly naked inside my home. I use a small fan. At night, I open my door and 3 windows for cross ventilation. I have 6 windows in my one-room home that I rent from my friend who owns the house, but I open 3 of the 6 windows and the door for cross ventilation. Many native people worldwide for thousands of years had the good sense to take off clothes when it's hot Sadly, many modern so-called educated people wear suits at their job in hot weather. They use air conditioners at work, at home, in their cars. That's insane for our environment, and if we give a damn about the climate crisis. Addiction to wearing clothes when we don't need them because it's not cold, and using air conditioners worsen the climate crisis. I've not owned a smartphone or a computer ever. I make many calls on our landline phone. I enjoy living simply. I enjoy it tremendously. We can change our stupid ways. And now from the book Heartlands by Daryl Yates Rist, a gay man whom I knew personally. He visited me here in Albuquerque back in the 80s. A strong gay activist. He did a long journey across the United States, meeting a great variety of gay and bisexual men, from a drag queen in Mississippi to a rough-hewn cowboy at the Denver Gay Rodeo, from an alligator trapper in Louisiana to an oil worker on Alaska's pipeline. Daryl Yates Rist describes the lives of gay men from every walk of life, ordinary men leading ordinary lives and yet constantly having to face everything from mild discrimination to outright bigotry and violence, as well as one of history's most devastating diseases. This book came out in 1992, and so many gay and bisexual men were dealing with the horror of AIDS. And so here are some portions from Daryl Yates Rist's book, Heartland, The Gay Man's Odyssey Across America. A young man, brown, not past 20, with a feather of a black mustache. He was shirtless. I prefer to say shirt-free. But anyhow, the crotch of his jeans, precisely where the head of his penis lay, was cross-hatched with dark blue thread. His waistband was unbuttoned. "I am Fernando," he trilled. "Where are you from?" Fernando was from El Salvador. He'd come here 2.5 years before. He was studying to be a nurse. "I studied to be a doctor in my country, like my brother," he explained. "He treats the prostitutes with AIDS." "Then why did he not go to medical school here?" I wondered. "Money, the language. I cannot spell English very fast, so I must be what I can." "And will you go home to work then? Back to El Salvador?" I asked. His face flashed. He answered sharply, "No, I will not go back to my country. I paid much money to stay here. I have all the documents now. There's too much fighting with guns over there. I'm not political. I don't like to talk about that." His brother, the doctor, still lived in the capital, San Salvador, and remained under threat by death squads. "He is alone in my house. My other family, they've all left, or they're killed now." He lost any certain count, but he thought either 15 or 17 of his family had already died in the Civil War, murdered, now get this, by the U.S.-backed Salvadoran army men in ambushes to exterminate leftists. U.S.-backed Salvadoran army men. They shot my uncles on the beach, Fernando said. One was just 25 years old. The other was 26. I saw them die. There was no reason. They were not communists. His young aunt, a school teacher, had been killed too for teaching her students the various political systems and forms of government. They said she was against El Salvador, but that was not true. The soldiers came into her house and cut her in the throat. He sliced his finger across his neck. And also her daughters and sons, there were 5. One boy was only 6 years old. They died together, the children. Fernando had come to the United States to flee war, not to be gay, but he discovered gayness soon enough when he got here. Fernando was much happier with homosexuality here. He told me, I'm gay and can still be a man. And then he said, but I was not a gay when I was in my country. I was, how do you call it, in a closet there. I didn't have anyone to be gay with. You have to have love to be gay. Fernando was all alone in the United States. His mother had escaped several years before he did to Guatemala with an American man. She'd gone there for love and a ticket to freedom. Who could say which counted more? Fernando had a sister in Los Angeles, but she'd long ago rejected him. She caught him soon before they fled El Salvador, having sex with a boyfriend. Fernando said, I was going to live with her when we came here, and now she will not let me in her house again. She will not see me anymore. I am sad for that. Fernando from El Salvador, a gay man who knew many family and other folks in El Salvador, mass murdered by U.S. tax dollars backing the Salvadoran military. Another portion from this book, Heartlands, in our city library. There is no barren land from which homosexual desire won't spring, not even Utah's Mormon desolation. I've come to believe that all men nurture it in some deep canyon of their longing. Above a urinal, a trucker's message offered love. 18-wheelers with a headache call for Slick on CB12 for a world trip and TLC, tender loving care. Another man offered his wife, he wrote, I'll watch. Men are tutored from boyhood by these John Stahl personals and learn their possibilities. We hold the privilege close among ourselves. Returning to his wife from a piss, the husband and father does not divulge the pleasure he takes in this network news while perching on a public pot, nor whether he sought relief by his own hand or another's. It is a shamed and sacred secret, a bond in all men's mute fraternity. A gay man, Eddie, told the class, Before gay liberation came and made a lifestyle out of it, I didn't know many of my friends on the farm or in the army during the war that didn't have a hankering for other men. There's a lot of rednecks who all along grew up doing homosexual sex. Everybody likes to diddle, said the gay man Eddie. And here Daryl Yates Rist writes about a priest that he met, a tall, gray, bald man of maybe 60 years old. I asked if I could talk to him about Catholicism and homosexuality. What is it like? He said. It's never easy. The bishop's Lenten pastoral letter asked us to pray for deliverance from the abuses in our society: abortion, rape, homosexuality. This priest said, I didn't read it to my parish. I couldn't. I have publicly defended gays and lesbians. The quote I gave to the TV news wasn't wrong, that homosexuality isn't the sin, the homosexual act is. And Daryl Yates Rist whispered to him, is that what you believe? The question weighed between us like the hot humidity. I say it that way or lose my job, the priest bemoaned. Even that put me on the bishop's shit list. He used to write me, Dear Bernie. Now it's always Father, formal. If the church at least openly admitted that it had gay priests and nuns, we'd have so much less emotional difficulty, you know. I've come to believe it's better to be hated for what you really are than loved for what you pretend to be. I love that. I've come to believe it's better to be hated for what you really are than loved for what you pretend to be. And the priest says, that's the way I feel every time I celebrate Mass. No one in your parish knows about you, says Daryl. I've come out to a couple of close parish friends. The bishop knows too, at least he knows my work with Dignity. That was a Roman Catholic based organization supporting gays and lesbians. He probably knows about most of the priests in the diocese who are gay. If you don't make waves, you're okay. And I'm too chicken to get too vocal. They retaliate. We don't want to get too militant and lose our place in the church. And Daryl asks this priest, you're celibate? He hesitated. Unattached, let's put it that way. His voice was sterile and slow. I did have a lover once in the mid-60s for 6 years. It took its toll on us, the double lives. We both were alcoholics. I went away for treatment, but an alcoholic. You cope with the stress by drinking more. I was in therapy for a while. It helped me get some stability in my life, but I realized I'd never be a heterosexual. And this gay priest says, I say Mass, but I don't feel it. This harassment from the Vatican, what they've said about homosexuals, since then I don't feel like doing a goddamn thing. It takes so much spiritual energy to always pretend. I play priest now. I don't have a whole lot of fervor. I do my job. I can't do more. It's going to take a martyr to change things. Most of us in this world are too afraid for crusades. And then another heart-wrenching, longer story from the book Heartlands, A Gay Man's Odyssey Across America. Many gay and bisexual men from all walks of life, different ethnicities that Darrell met. Chris was young, mid-20s, powerfully tall, broad-shouldered. He chain-smoked, exhuming plumes like a demon, and held tight to the claws carved on the arms of the chair. His fingernails chewed to the quick. Chris said, "I want a little white house with a picket fence and the same man for 30 years. If I can't have that, I don't want nothing at all." He spoke with precise country spice of a TV preacher. "My daddy's congregation is 4,000 every Sunday, the largest Pentecostal church in the Midwest." I was raised in a family I didn't know was abusive till I grew up and started dealing with my alcoholism. I thought everyone was routinely beaten because my parents preached that's what God expected you to do to children. I have to say, I don't know anyone angrier than I am. I think anger is a catalyst for change. And this gay man, Chris, whose father was this Pentecostal preacher, Chris says, all the male children on both sides of my family and some of the women were preachers. It was just expected. I had a war inside. God called me to do something for my world, but I was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. I couldn't rationalize that with my homosexual feelings. A fire burned in Chris's eyes, fevered his cheeks. "This is very hard for me," he whispered. "I've buried it. I've tried to. I don't think for a long time I even knew why I was angry." Chris had been a problem child whose parents had sent him away to St. Louis for junior high, to a Pentecostal boarding school. They knew in their heart what the problem was, Chris said. "I was working the mall before I could ejaculate. In the 7th grade, I instigated a thing with one of my teachers. There were plenty of sex acts in the dorm. At 18, Chris had come out to his very religious Pentecostal parents, and that was 1980. They had forced him into so-called cures at a series of deliverance centers, Christian pseudo-psychiatric institutions. Preachers. They were also rich real estate entrepreneurs. The family home had cost $500,000. They presented it, Chris said, as either be straight or we'll cut you off. I was scared. His first therapist, deliverer, a recovering homo, Chris put it, had seduced him and then proceeded to certify to my folks that he'd made me straight. Chris owned and sang with a Christian rock band. And he says, I remember my folks waking me up at 4 in the morning, casting devils out of me, shaking me, slapping me, screaming in tongues, commanding Satan at the top of their lungs, rebuking the demon of homosexuality, sometimes in public during a service. I can't describe the horror of having your mother look at you from across a crowded room and burst into tears for no reason, simply because you are you. My mother and father, and I need to tell you this, my parents are very big into prophecy. Mom told me if I didn't go straight, I'd be dead of the homosexual plague in 24 months. So I waited the 24 months, and when it was over, I cried all day because I was still alive. In college, a Pentecostal Bible school, Chris, for the first time, sought out women. My lifelong dream, Chris said, was to be a preacher. I expected to pastor Daddy's huge church. Chris met Ruth. She seemed to know all about me, he recalled, meaning his pedigree and destiny, not his homosexual longing. Chris fasted for hours in the chapel each night to keep himself from cruising the parks and the gay bars. Ruth prayed with him. I'd pray, oh God, set me free, make me clean. Sometimes I'd hear her praying the same thing. She had this girlfriend she couldn't go a few hours without seeing. They'd have a fight, she'd cry for days. One day I told her God had delivered me from homosexuality. She burst into tears. I said, I know you're fighting the same thing. My parents said God put us together so we could fight it together the rest of our lives. His laugh was small and sour. You know, one time I had tried to feel her breasts. She said, no, it's wrong before we're married. And when that love with Ruth failed, his parents arranged a marriage. Ellen, an older woman whom the men of the church had passed by, an accomplished gospel keyboardist, good family. They announced their decision to Chris over breakfast at the International House of Pancakes in Peoria, Illinois, when his gospel band was in town for a gig. That was August. They gave him till January to do it. Ellen lived 3 hours away. I drove down, Chris said. She was boring, but that night I called Dad and said, I did it. I'm going to marry her. I never asked her. I just sat down and said, I'm very talented. My family's prominent. I stand to be pastor of my father's church. Your dream is to be a preacher's wife, so we're going to get married. She laughed, and on the 27th of November that same year, we were married. Chris tried to run away right before the wedding. His father caught up with him and blackmailed him back, threatened to have him arrested for stealing some family cash. Chris said, you have to understand how afraid I was. I had no marketable skills except gospel music and the Pentecostal ministry. My education meant nothing to the outside world. I had no money except what my parents gave me. I thought all being gay was having sex in parks and bathhouses. My parents taught me gays were all liars and murderers and couldn't even hold a job and earn a living. I lived completely in the world of my parents. I believed them. They want you to believe that about yourself. A whole series of self-fulfilling prophecies. And if you buy into it at all, you begin to live it. You can't escape. You say, I can't help it. It's who I am. Everybody like me lives this way. His parents told him gays were all degenerate. And by the time they were through with him, he was. Chris sobbed, "It's good for me to be able to feel like this. For years I could not cry. I was angry. I felt violent, but I couldn't feel sad. I thought I was unique, so I hated everybody." Chris's band, Redemption Band, was a big success by the time he graduated college. "You looked inside my lonely heart and made each fantasy come true." He sang their theme song for me bitterly, one of those distressing kinds of lyrics with which born-agains eroticize Jesus. Redemption Band had done some 200 gigs a year, averaged 7,000 seats, ranked at the top of the gospel charts, had been booked a number of times by Jim and Tammy Baker for their Praise the Lord Club and Heritage USA. They'd grossed 500,000 record sales in their last year. Their transportation was a Silver Eagle bus with 3 bedrooms. Chris's mouth grew rank with a smile. He said, "There's nothing like slinging up with big-time preachers in the back of that bus. I've had the best. I fulfilled my parents' prophecy. I fucked over myself. I fucked everybody. I was a drunk and doing drugs. I was ripped on stage, but the fans got high on Jesus anyway." On a gig in Texarkana, Arkansas, his childhood home, he suddenly began to escape his parents' control. Chris left his marriage, stoned and depressed. He eluded the band and his wife to cruise a shopping mall and ran into 2 old friends from grade school there. They'd been lovers since high school. And that was the beginning of what he could only describe as a spiritual odyssey. The first time he'd met someone gay who was not a fast park fuck or just a story in Newsweek magazine. Real people who loved each other, had good jobs, paid their bills. He split with his wife, went back on that road. The escape was incomplete. Chris owned the band, had the bus to pay for. "I couldn't quit," he argued. He came out to the record company and the band. They told me to keep my mouth shut to the public. The fans were blessed. We were making big money. He tried several times to commit suicide and returned to his parents, prodigal and desperate. They had him committed. In the hospital, Chris overheard his father talking with the doctor, a fundamentalist and a family friend. Dad said he got trapped after an adolescent experience. If you can make him forget long enough, God can come through. And the doctor said, "I assure you, Reverend, he will forget." Chris paused and reflected. "There's something I really want to say. Through all those shock treatments, I forgot my friends' phone numbers. I forgot my address. I forgot what my parents looked like, but I never forgot I was a homosexual." His folks prepared a final treatment. They wanted me to go to Mexico. They found this guy who cured homosexuality by castration. To save his manhood, he overdosed again on pills and booze. And my time is running out, but fortunately, Chris later found freedom from that oppressive religion, and he came to believe that who he was as a gay man was okay with God. And even though I am no longer religious, I strongly compliment him for finding freedom from anti-gay religion. Good night.
Live every day as if it were the last, because before you know it, time goes past and life's just not that long. Tell all you love that you love them so, because even if you do, they might not know. And one day we'll